Hello everyone, this is a special video. I'll be listing my desires for Monster Hunter 6. This is a wish list based on my personal preferences regarding Monster Hunter. You should all know that I'm biased. Some of my ideas will be radical. Some of them will also just be a no-brainer, like I think everyone is thinking sort of the same thing. But I'm going to fly through these rather rapid fire, and I'm sure that some of my more radical ideas will hit you like a truck. Just know that I'm aware that Capcom probably won't do any of the radical ideas that I'm suggesting, but because I'm going to be going through it so fast, you're probably going to be like, huh? What did you just say? Don't worry about it. Remember, I'm not Capcom. Anyway, some ideas will be overlapping because I would like Monster Hunter to explore new systems in the gameplay loop. I'll elaborate and explore those concepts in a way that mimics the player's experience through the game, and you'll understand what I mean once I start talking about them. This video is going to be super casual. It's for fun. Feel free to explore your ideas for Monster 6 in the comments below. Depending on the responses, I might make a follow-up video that explores your comments and questions. Remember, because this is all hypothetical, anything goes. Capcom isn't going to watch my videos and radically change development, but if I'm lucky, maybe they'll have some of the same thoughts as me and integrate similar ideas to the next game. Alright, so Jacob, what would you like to see in a hypothetical Monster Hunter 6? Okay, so starting from the title screen, it should go without saying that cross-play and cross-save needs to be integrated. That's obvious. In general, I want the UI, the overall UI, to be improved upon from World and Rise, but I think that's also a given. As for character creation, I think having character edits is good, being able to edit your character. And players should be given the option outside of payable DLC vouchers. But if the character edit DLC vouchers have to return, I would hope that you could also change your character's name, because right now you can't. In character creation, I'm hopeful that body size modifiers can be integrated. Look, it doesn't need to be like how it is in Street Fighter 6. It could just literally be slight height and width modifiers that would be tied to equipment as well. I know that Dark Souls has a system like this. I pray that Capcom can integrate something like this as well. I think it would be really great. I would also like character voice acting to return, only with the caveat that it's a mainline game and the player character would have more down-to-earth dialogue compared to how it was in Rise. They should respect and fear the monsters they're fighting. Like, it's okay to have a silly line from time to time, but like, because that is part of Monster Hunter's aesthetic, but overall I'd like it to be a bit more chill. If character voice acting returns, I also hope that Capcom would allow the player character to talk in the cutscenes. I'd like World Standard of only having one Palico Comrade to return. We do not need an army of slave cats. On that note, I believe that we do not need Palamutes or Shakalakas to return, because the game needs to be slowed down, and I don't think underwater combat is ever returning. So after character creation, we would enter the hub, obviously, and so let's talk about Monster Hunter 6's hub. We previously got two seaside locations last generation. We got Astera and Elgato. We also got a Japanese-themed location in Kimura and a cold biome-themed location in Celiana. If they wanted to make Monster Hunter 6's hub feel fresh, they could put it in a desert again, similar to Valhabar or LocLac, because it's been a while since we've had a desert location. If they were to do a returning hub from a previous game, then I think Dondorma would probably be the strongest choice. But if it doubles down on being the anniversary title, they could remake Kokoto and Mindguard. That would also be an option. In the end, I don't really mind what the new hub is. It really could be anything. But I have to say, I can't deny my most cardinal desire. I'd like for them to bring back Port Tanzia. I think, but like, I'm not a huge fan of Monster 3 Ultimate. I think Tri is better, but Port Tanzia has a special place in my heart. And yeah, I just really love the sailor outfits in that game. They're cute. I like them. Now, I don't see them bringing back the traveling caravan concept like they did in Monster Hunter 4, but it would be cool if they did. I also don't see them bringing back seasons, the seasons concept, but if it was implemented, I would hope that it would have an effect on the quest selection, as well as just doing all the things that it did in Monster Hunter 2. Maybe not as harsh, though. I would like to see a full-force return of the monster bounty system from Monster Hunter 2, combined with the bounty systems from World and Rise, and the anomaly reward system from Sunbreak. Ideally, we'd have an involved system of bounties on every monster that fluctuates and rewards the player with Zenian items. Players shouldn't be required to check the bounty board or accept a bounty, because that's what the quest system does already. You already know what monster you're hunting, and it tells you how much money you're going to get on the quest. Rather, this bounty system should be a passive reward that's just always running, and it can be capitalized on if the player happens to do the research and actually look at it. Think of it similar to the world investigation system, but you don't actually need to collect the quests and manage them. It's done for you automatically because it's tied to an RNG system of monster bounties. Basically, at all times, every monster has a bounty, and after every quest, you get an extra reward for that bounty at all times. This will never happen, but I would love for resource points to be removed from the franchise forever, and the game stick to Zenny as the only currency. Again, it's not going to happen, but I really don't like resource points. I want the removal of the item farming / trading system. I'd like it so that the only way for players to gain items is through the maps, through gathering, or through buying them at a shopkeep. With the speed that the player can gather items now in World and Rise, I think that this will lend itself more to a more immersive gameplay experience, rather than menu management, which we were doing with the farm trade systems. I'd like the meal / canteen system to return to Monster Hunter 2's standard of requiring items in the player's inventory to make a meal. My idea would be that the player is required to supply at the very least, a raw meat consumable item in order to have a meal. And the raw meat would do the very least just give the player the plus 50 stamina boost. I don't think it needs to be as evil as Monster Hunter 2's system. It doesn't have to have negative buffs. It could all be positive buffs like it is in the current games. What I would like to see is it requiring dedicated cooking items from your item box. These items would then be provided to the player regularly through quest rewards, or you could buy them at a shop, or you could gather them. As for the hub NPCs, or just the game NPCs, I'd like for them to have strong personalities like they had in World and Rise. I would like a small but critically important cast of characters that bounce off each other very well. So basically I just want good writing with these characters. Furthermore, I'd like the chit-chat option in Rise to actually have relevance in the game progression. I also think it would be worth it for Capcom to deep dive on their characters and make them more human. Look, if they really want to sell these characters as waifu bait, they need to actually make these characters that the player can be friends with in the game. The NPCs should have secrets that they're withholding from the player. And if the player forms a healthy relationship with the NPC, either, by completing requests, doing quests, or giving the NPC items, then the NPC will share more about their life, their values, their dreams, and then maybe the NPC could provide the player with rewards, like maybe their shop upgrades, or you get shop discounts, or they give you items or special equipment. Basically, I want there to be relationships between the player, hunter, and the NPCs in the game. I want the ability to eat meals with the NPCs again, like in Monster Hunter 2. If you could invite the NPCs to hang out with you, that'd be cool. Perhaps we could even bring back the follower system from Sunbreak, but have the followers only accompany you if you've become friends with them first. The supporting NPCs don't even need to all be hunters, they could provide support in other ways. I'm not against a handler character returning, as long as the relationship between the handler and the player character is actually meaningful. I want these NPCs to be heavily involved in quest lines. In fact, I'd like if quests could come straight from the NPCs themselves. I'd love if random NPCs that represent the general population, maybe they're people from other villages, would go to the village the hub that you're currently at, and they would present new quests to the player, and you go to the NPCs directly to get the quests. And then obviously, if an NPC request is finished, they should be added to the quest board as quests that can be repeated indefinitely. I want the game's narrative to end at the end of low rank. I want the final boss, the final story boss, to be at the end of low rank like it was in the older games, and I want high rank to be considered the end game, and I want high rank to actually be difficult. I'd like them to keep world system of having the selection of quests for both single player and multiplayer just be in the one single grouping, so I don't want a separation of offline quests and online quests. I also want quests to be on random intervals, and I want them cycled in and out, which I know not everyone likes that, but I prefer that. Now, I would like if every monster was regularly available for the most part, but because most monsters can appear on multiple maps, I'm suggesting that maybe the map location will change for the monster. So let's say you go hunt a Rathalos in the forest, and then when you return from the quest, that quest is now replaced with a Rathalos hunt in the volcano. And then when you do that, he is now replaced with the Rathalos hunt in another map, and then it cycles back through again. Overall, I want the player to be more restricted by the systems and be forced to play by the game's rules. I think it just lends itself to a more immersive experience. I believe that delivery quests should be removed and integrated into the hunting quests as either subquests again, or requests, similar to how it was done in Monster Hunter Rise and Sunbreak, that can be completed during any outing to a hunting field. Yeah, delivery quests, basically, you could just do them passively on any hunting quest. If possible, I'd like for Capcom to completely redesign the quest system. This is a big ask, and I know they're not going to do this. But right now, the quest system is village quest on loop. You're at the village, you go on a quest, you come back to the village immediately when the quest is over. World was experimenting with the option to remain in the hunting field after the quest finished. I propose the option to select multiple quests at once, depart on an expedition, and freely complete those multiple quests as you desire without a time limit. There's no way that Capcom would do this, but it is something that I would like to see at some point. Probably if they ever go full open world, we'll probably see something like that. In other words, the gameplay loop should be built around expedition outings instead of quest departures. But yeah, that's not going to happen anytime soon. Now that the hunter has departed on a quest, I imagine that Monster Hunter 6 will have maps that are a fusion of World and Rise's game design, but maybe they'll surprise us with some crazy new gimmick or gameplay style that creates a new and fresh experience. Regardless, I highly doubt wire bugs or underwater combat will return. And I don't see them taking the full plunge into complete open world just yet. I don't really care if it's genuine new maps or the return of old maps. Either is fine as long as the monster hunting and tracking gameplay is involved and fun. I would like the overall map navigation to resemble that of Monster Hunter 4, where the player can freely climb most walls and terrain. That would be nice. Here's another big ask. I would like for there to be more than 3 large monsters on the map at once. I think that the maps are big enough now, and I think that the maps can handle 4, 5, maybe even 6 monsters on the map at once. Obviously, I'd like it to be relatively balanced. I imagine it being more like maybe there's 2 to 3 great jaggy, and then there's 1 to 2 larger wyverns on the map. So I'm not saying that there should be like 6 Rathalos on the map, but I'm not opposed to maybe there's always a Rathian and Rathalos in the forest map, on top of a drome monster like Great Jaggy or Velocidrome, and then maybe there's also like an Anjanath and a Tobi-Kadachi. So there's like a good plethora of monsters, but I definitely think that 3 is too little, and that if the maps get bigger, we're going to need more large monsters at all times. Let's talk about subspecies for a second. For one, I think that small monsters deserve subspecies. It's been way too long since white Velociprey was actually still a thing. I'd love to see like little plum hermitars. I think that'd be cute. I would also like to see subspecies in general make a big return. This is a bit of a radical idea, but if the subspecies is just a color swap, like Pink Rathian or Black Diablos, then I'd like the monster to be treated exactly the same as the regular monster. But it's simply like a rare spawn. I usually associate it, it's like the shiny. It's like the shiny monster. So you go on the hunt, and every you've hunted this monster like 20 times, and then suddenly it's a pink Rathian instead of a regular Rathian, and you're like, wow, that's cool. So like the material rewards would be the same, the combat would be the same, it's simply a novelty for the player. It'd be interesting if it wasn't just restricted to full color swaps, and that there would be slight color variance, like maybe a monster would be more dull or saturated, or maybe monsters could have specific temperaments. So this is a big idea that was not actually my own. It's someone who was in my chat proposed it. Variance in monsters could be tied to your rewards. Perhaps the game spawns a larger discolored Rathian that's slightly more aggressive and has more health and attacks harder. And if you hunt it, you get more rewards from hunting it. Like, what if rewards are tied to the monster size, and the bigger the size, there's a slight modification on the rewards, both material and Zenny. And then maybe if there's more than one Rathian on the quest, then the player could evaluate the options and choose the preferred Rathian they wish to hunt. So one of them could be, it's a smaller, weaker Rathian, and you get less rewards, but it'll be an easier hunt and you get it done faster. Or you could go hunt the larger Rathian that's more aggressive, has more health, but you get better rewards, you get extra bonus rewards. I'd like the binoculars to be treated as a key item. I'd like it if the player is expected to go to a vantage point, you climb up really high and then you use the binoculars to scan the local monsters. The binoculars could provide the player with information or rating on the monster, as well as maybe to mark the monster on the map. The binoculars could also be used to update the player's hunter notes, and also be used to take pictures. I don't want scout flies to return. I'd like the monster tracks to simply be more visible and have a clear mark of direction the monster is moving so that they can be followed. The hunter's notes, in general, I think should be a big focus. They should have more importance and a bigger focus. I also think the hunter's notes should be easier to navigate. I'd also like to see the monster's diet and territory route included on the hunter's notes, as well as just other novelty notes in general. I'd like if the player was encouraged to fill out the hunter's notes as they play. Perhaps if the player tests different elemental weapons on different parts of the monster, that's what fills in the elemental weaknesses, which would be fun. Maybe not everyone would like that. I'd also like the option to customize the notes. You should be able to add your own written comments into the hunter's notes. And you should be able to select what you believe the monster's main weakness is, and then maybe whatever you select gets attached to the logo for easy reference, because I know that there's mods for this already. You could basically, once you know what the monster's weakness is, instead of just memorizing it, you could hit a little mark, and it would mark the little icon and tell you, oh, it's weak to this, because you've marked it, you chose that. Ideally, the monster notes should provide the player with more than enough information to track the monster without the use of scout flies. I would like the slinger and the mantle to return. The slinger should function as it did in World. It is effective. Mantles should be treated as items rather than equipment. Mantles should be treated as items rather than equipment. The ghillie mantle should be a mainstay item that is used to evade monsters and sharpen your sword. Other mantles should be entirely defensive in their purpose, just to increase resistances, and that's it. I'd also like for there to be new trap types, like a bomb trap or poison trap. I think that traps should be given higher focus and more importance. Look, if the player is given enough sufficient information on the monster's habits and territory, they should be encouraged to just place traps along the monster's territory and wait. You place the poison trap, and the bomb trap, and then your pitfall trap, and then as the monster walks through, they spring the traps, take damage, and then they fall into the trap, you deal damage by attacking. It'd be cool if the game encourages the player to use the field horn to call the monster. Perhaps there could be a system of hunting calls, or a horn, like a Kiropeko horn or something, that's designed to specifically attract a monster that you're looking for. Like you can blow a Rathian call and it attracts a Rathalos to your position. Overall, I'd just like it if the monster would go to the player instead of the player having the trouble trying to find the monster. There's just more involved systems of tracking and finding the monster rather than just you follow the waypoint. I don't want it to be that. It'd be cool if the monster, you make the monster come to you, basically. Speaking of traps, I would also like it if the player can pick up traps and replace them if they were placed incorrectly. Obviously, if they were used, you don't get to use them again. But if you place a trap and you're like, I want to move it, you should be able to undo it, pick it back up, and place it somewhere else. I'd also like the same thing for raw meat, or any meat. I'd also like the idea of a scented meat. It's a meat that has a scent that specifically attracts monsters to your location. If the maps are big enough, then maybe we can reincorporate riding monsters like Jagras. I don't really want to see Palamutes return. That's just my preference. I'd love day and night cycles and weather to have effects on the player and the environment. I'd specifically love weather having a big effect on the player's ability to hunt. Like, most people are going to say, Jacob, this is insane, but I would like it if anytime the player is overwhelmed with water, like if you're rained on or if you're walking through water, you should just get water blight, just innately. Anytime the player gets snow on them, like if they're being snowed on, they should just get ice blight. Or anytime the player enters like the hottest parts of the volcano, or if you touch magma, you should just get fire blight instantly. And then, of course, if they have resistances to, you know, ice, water, fire, then you wouldn't get the blight to begin with. If you have a high fire resistance, you could touch the magma and not get fire blight. But if you don't, you should just get fire blight. I would like a temperature system to be implemented where, depending on your location, the temperature of your player hunter changes. So if you move into a cold place, then it's colder, and when it's colder, it'll have an effect on you. And it doesn't need to be a punishing effect. It could be a lesser effect. But overall, I think that armor themselves, like every piece of armor, should have a temperature rating, and that temperature rating will give you resistance to certain temperatures. So it's not like it adjusts your player temperature, it just gives you resistance. And actually, I'm going to expand on this in this next note, that I think there should be new systems integrated into the armor regarding resistances in general. So right now, the armor has fire, water, thunder, ice, and dragon resistance. There's stats for all those. But also, I believe there should be stats for things like heat resistance, wind resistance, poison, blast, paralysis, all these things, stun resistance. I don't think we need these things tied to armor skills. Rather, each and every armor should have stats associated with all of these ailments. It would be a pretty long list, but I think that with every single piece of armor having these things, players would be more encouraged to choose armor that gives them specific resistances. Because right now, the way that armor works in 5th gen, if you want poison resistance, you charm in poison resistance or you deal with the effects. But it would be cool if more armor just natively has poison resistance. And that way the player be more selective with their armor and be like, oh, this one has poison resistance and thunder resistance, and I'm fighting a monster that has thunder and poison, whatever that might, I don't think that exists, but you get what I mean. The next thing on my wish list is highly debated, but I believe that the player should be able to manage all their items and equipment at the camp. They should always have access to their item box. I just think that this is the direction the games are going, and we should not go backwards. Also, this is really radical, I think that all material drops, every time you carve a monster, it should be sent directly to the item box. There should not be, it should not go in your pouch. Supplies for hunting the monster or combining to make supplies to hunt the monster, those should remain limited in quantity in your item pouch. And it should be easy to replenish those items in the field. Again, I don't want there to be a farm or trading thing in the hub. I would hope that the gameplay loop would invite the player to rely on the environment for their items. If everything is coming from the environment, the player would probably sooner stay out in the field and just gather, you know, herbs and honey and bowgun ammo in the field rather than going back to the base camp and relying on it. If there's enough out in the field, they just won't do that. And I think that that is a better overall direction for the series. For the hunting combat overall, I'd like the player and monster engagements to be slower. I'd like it to be as slow as World, if not slower. I don't want it to be fast like Rise or flashy. I want the monsters to be scary and intimidating, and I want the game to be in favor of the monster, not the player. I would like the game to encourage the player to use stealth to evade monsters that are like dangerous. Large, aggressive monsters should be out there to destroy the player. Rathalos should be treated the same as Devil Joe. They need to be these fierce monsters that wear you down and destroy you if you're underprepared. I hope that Turf Wars do return, but frankly, I don't need the fanfare. We don't need the little pop-up that tells you that they're fighting, because it's pretty obvious that the monsters are fighting. This is a small little thing, but I'd like it if the player, when they do the kickback gesture, it'd be cool if their health like would recover like very slowly. That'd be nice. So after killing the monster, you've completed the quest. Normally, the game gives you a 60-second timer when the quest is over. But personally, I would love if that 60-second timer is removed. I think it's archaic. It doesn't need to be in the game anymore. There should be a menu option to send the player home at any point they desire. They can stay out in the field for as long as they want once the quest is over. That should be permitted. Now, once you complete the quest, there should be a little pop-up that says like, return to the village, press this right now. And that should be something you can do. However, overall, that timer is archaic, it's unnecessary, and for the most part, a lot of players, if you're trying to get drops, you're probably, maybe if you miss the tail carve, you're gonna wanna run over and grab that tail carve. I think it's unfair to restrict the player to that 60-second timer. We could still have the quest complete jingle play, be like dun 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 dun, and then maybe it plays for like, 60 seconds, and then it just fades out. Once the player returns from the quest, I'd like to have a complete rework of the reward screen system. Now, I mentioned this before. Ideally, I would like a Monster Hunter game where every single monster has a fluctuating bounty, including small monsters. When the player returns from a quest or an expedition, all the monster kills, including small monsters, should be tallied, and the player should be given a complete reward. I have a bit of a diagram here I'm going to throw together on the screen. So as you can see here, every single monster you hunted on the quest would be tallied. There would be a bounty associated with that monster. And then there would also be material rewards for hunting that monster. Account items would also be listed here, and then you'd get a tally. And so, regardless if the monster was a target monster, you would still get rewards for it. And then ideally, the quest results, the quest reward would be a whole separate reward as well. It'd be its own separate reward screen. So, if the quest was to hunt one Rathalos, on top of the previous reward you got for the bounty, you would also get the quest reward, and you get separate material rewards for that as well. Ideally, because there is no farm or trade system, player would be regularly rewarded with extra herbs and honey to make potions or bowgun ammo if they play well. It'll reward you with the items. At this point, the game is already giving you free herbs and honey through the farm and trading system, so why not just remove the farm and trading system and just give them to you by playing the game? I see this as an absolute win. Ideally, then, the player would also be regularly rewarded with, like, raw meat or cooking, ingredients to cook your canteen meals. It would be cool if the monsters you hunt actually give you meat. So, like, even, like, Rathalos would give you, like, dragon meat that you can use to cook with. That way, it really feels like this down-to-earth, immersive experience where you're hunting and eating the monsters. Back from the quest, the player can now use their materials to forge new equipment. And I have a few suggestions on equipment that I'd like to see, but I don't think Capcom will implement. Again, all these ideas I don't think Capcom will actually implement, but it would just be cool if they actually took the game in this direction. The one thing I think that they could implement, and they should have implemented since day one, is the ability to use high-rank materials for low-rank equivalence forging. In other words, the player should be able to use a Rathalos scale plus if the forging requirements ask for a regular Rathalos scale, like a low-rank Rathalos scale. You should be able to just use high-rank materials for low-rank crafting. Obviously, it would not work the other way around. You can't use low-rank materials for high-rank materials, but I think if the player is playing high-rank, they should not be required to go back to low-rank in order to upgrade some weapon. That's really silly. I'd love if armor spheres were removed and armor upgrades were like how they were in Monster Hunter 2, but that will never happen. I'd also love if armor for subspecies monsters was simply a cosmetic color swap. Again, this has all to do with this idea of, like, I'd like subspecies to be in the game, but them not actually be separate monsters. but it doesn't really work because like there's lots of subspecies that are like meant to be separate monsters. They have like different ailments and different attack patterns and all that. But I don't know. I just think it'd be neat if even if the subspecies isn't in the game, that the armor could at least get the cosmetic color swap. Like even if pink Rathian isn't in the game, you could still make pink Rathian armor, and it's the exact same as regular Rathian armor. It's just colored pink. I'd like layered armor to stay in the franchise as a post-game, end-game feature. I don't think it should be unlocked right away. I think it should stay as an end-game thing. I said in my Monster Hunter 2 video that I would love if armor skills focused mostly on defensive skills and resistances, and be structured in a way that encouraged the player to focus on running certain sets that have defensive or environmental benefits over offensive skills. I would love if offensive skills were more so tied to weapons, and that we'd have more weapons with skill-based gimmicks, like how Seregios weapons have the evade sharpen ability or Kajar weapons have critical element. I'd like more weapons to have, maybe like a Zinogre weapon has latent power, just as like a skill attached to it. I'd like for Capcom to separate armor and weapons from each other and have their own separate, dedicated importance to one another. However, I understand that reworking this system is again highly unlikely. They're probably just going to stick to what they have. As for weapons, I don't think they'll add a new weapon type. And I'm actually not going to ask for a new weapon type either. I think that the weapons are fine as they are. I think that we have enough weapons as is, and there's lots of niches to cover with those weapons. However, I would ask for Capcom to simplify the weapons. I do believe that the current learning curve for all weapons in Monster Hunter is still too steep and too complicated. I still have to teach new players about weapon attacks and combos because the game itself does not properly teach the player or encourage the player to experiment properly. It really doesn't. I know some people, they do, they look up guides, but you shouldn't have to look up guides. I myself have over a decade of experience with the weapons, so new combos and moves come naturally with each game. I play the new game, oh, there's one new attack that's been made into the game, cool, I already know the weapon like the back of my hand. Adding this new move into what I already know is quite easy. But new players can and will struggle because they'll be overwhelmed by the whole moveset immediately. There's already too much going on with these weapons, especially when some attacks are simply more effective than others. If the player isn't immediately instructed on what is the most efficient combo or playstyle, they will fumble to learn it without a veteran's insight. It should not require a veteran to watch someone play the game and be like, hey, you're not playing it very well. You should do it like this, and that way you can capitalize and do more damage. That should not be a thing. The game should teach you that. And I know that, and again, I know this isn't for every new player. Some new players have no trouble with all this. But I've personally seen enough new players struggle and not understand like half the weapon movesets, even like all the way until like the end game. I think that this is enough for me to voice this as a legitimate concern. Also, I just think that Longsword sucks now and that they should bring it back to how it was in Monster Hunter 2. I don't like what they've been doing to that weapon. Alright, now the final section of this wish list is going to be a discussion on what monsters would be in Monster Hunter 6. And this is the part that people like the most, so I saved it for last. But I actually don't have a lot to say because, well, I'll explain. Personally, I'd like for them to mostly rely on old returning monsters, as I believe that Monster Hunter already has a wonderful selection of monsters to choose from that fill a number of unique niches and playstyles. There's also a number of classic monsters that could very much use an update, and I'd love to see what they would do with them in, a modern game. However, if they are going to focus mostly on new monsters and not have a lot of old returning monsters, then the only request that I have is please just make a new crab monster. That's all I ask for. One new crab monster. Whatever else you add, cool. There are certain monsters that I want to say I demand to be in the next game's roster, otherwise I'll just be sad. Like number one, of course, is Kirin. Like I want Kirin to be in the next title. I also want Shogun and Daimyo to be in the next title. I want the crabs to be back. Also, I would like Kashella and Teostra to return, because I think Kashella and Teostra should be in every game. And then finally, if subspecies return, I want Azir and Pink, because I just think that they are pretty. But that one really isn't even required. It's mostly just Kirin, the crabs, and Kashella and Teostra. because I already know Rathalos, Rathian are already in the game. If those monsters are in the game, then I will never complain about the roster. I just want those ones. Obviously, I have a number of other favorite monsters I'd like to see return, but I don't want my wish list to be too big here, because I'm already asking for a ridiculous amount of strange requests that I know Capcom won't deliver on. So I feel like this very short selection of monsters is my reasonable request for the roster. Like, obviously, I'd like to see Fatalis or Latron return, but I'm not going to demand it. I'm not going to be upset when they inevitably don't return. Same with, like, Tigrex or Zynogar and Nargacuga, Brachydios, Glav... Like, literally any of the popular flagship monsters, there's a chance they might not return, and I'm not going to be upset. As long as Kieran and the Crabs and Kashel and Teostra are in the game, I'm Gucci. I'm good. I do have a number of monsters that I don't want to return. I think that the Bear Trio can stay in the portable games. I really don't want Barioth to come back. I think Tigrex and Nargacuga are better monsters. Like, I love Lagiacrus, but I don't think Lagiacrus should return unless there's underwater combat. Same with Chameleos. I think Chameleos is an awesome monster, but I think that he's just being ruined with these newer games, and the newer games just don't complement Chameleos' gimmicks. I think a lot of Rise newcomers can be benched. Like, I don't want to see Magnamalo, Raknakadaki, Almadron, or Somnicanth in Monster Hunter 6. The newcomers in Sunbreak, I think, are welcome. Like, I'd love to see Malzeno or Lunagaron, for sure. That's it! Again, these are just my hypothetical ideas for Monster Hunter 6. If Capcom does any of these things, I'll obviously be a very happy camper. And now to ask everyone watching, do you have any ideas for Monster Hunter 6? If you do have ideas for Monster Hunter 6, write them down in the comments below. I'd love to do a follow-up video that continues this discussion. If we get some good responses that I feel like, oh, I could literally make a video just literally reading the comments and talking about them, I might do that. Or if you have any questions about some of the ideas that I proposed. Again, it's all hypothetical, it's all for fun. Who knows what they have in store? I'm excited for Monster Hunter 6. I know it's going to be good. It has to be good. Otherwise, I'm done with the franchise forever. Thanks for watching, everyone! Bye-bye!